My name is Lydia. I am 38 years old. I live in a small flat with my husband and 2 teenage sons. I used to have a job in a clothing store, but I left it last year. I thought my family would support me, but I was wrong. I worked in that store for almost 7 years. I sold shirts, dresses, and shoes. I talked to customers, folded clothes, and cleaned the shelves. At first, I liked it. I liked earning my own money. I liked buying small gifts for my children and helping to pay the bills. But the manager was not kind. She wanted us to work late hours without pay. She wanted the shop perfect, even if it meant staying until midnight. My back hurt, my feet hurt, and my smile started to feel fake. One night I came home so tired I could not eat. I sat on the bed and thought, I cannot do this anymore. The next morning, I told my manager I was leaving. She did not ask me to stay. She just said, "Fine." When I told my husband, he said, "You did the right thing. You should not stay where you are unhappy." His words made me feel warm. I thought he understood me. I thought he would give me time to rest and find something better. For the first few weeks, I stayed home. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of my sons. I told myself I would start looking for work soon. But inside, I had another idea. I wanted to bake from home. I always loved baking bread and cakes. The smell of warm bread made me happy. I thought maybe I could sell it to neighbors, friends, and small cafes. I thought maybe I could have my own small business. But I told no one. I was afraid they would laugh. After a month, my husband started to change. One evening, as we ate dinner, he said, "You are home all day. I am paying for everything. This is not fair." His voice was not loud, but it hurt me. I said, "I am looking for work." He only answered, "Then try harder." Every morning I woke up early. I made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, and swept the floor. After my sons left for school, the flat became quiet. I washed clothes, cleaned the bathroom, and went to the market. I cooked lunch and prepared dinner. I worked all day in the house, but no one said thank you. One Sunday, my older sister came to visit. She looked around the flat and said, "You keep this place clean, but it does not bring money. Why not get a real job?" I told her softly, "I have an idea to bake bread and cakes from home." She laughed a little and said, "That is not a business. You need something serious." That night I could not sleep. I kept hearing her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe no one would take me seriously. The next day, I decided to try anyway. I baked 2 loaves of bread, just for myself. I shaped them with care. I brushed them with eggs so they would shine. The smell filled the flat. When my neighbor came to return a bowl she had borrowed, she stopped at the door and said, "It smells wonderful." I gave her one loaf to take home. She smiled and said, "If you sell these, I will buy from you." Her words stayed with me all day. Still, life at home was not easy. My husband came home from work looking tired. Sometimes he said nothing. Sometimes he asked again, "Did you find a job yet?" I wanted to tell him my dream, but I was scared he would say it was useless. My sons were busy with school. They did not ask how I was feeling. I began to feel invisible. I could be cooking, cleaning, baking, and no one noticed unless something was missing. One afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I wrote down what I would need to start baking for others: flour, sugar, yeast, eggs, boxes, and bags. I added the prices. It was not a big amount, but without my own income, it felt impossible. I thought about the days when I worked in the shop. Even with the shouting manager, I had my own money. I could buy a scarf if I wanted. I could give my sons a treat. Now I had to ask my husband for every coin. It made me feel small. One evening, I went for a walk. The air was cool. The street lights were on. I passed a small cafe and looked through the window. People were drinking coffee and laughing. I wished I could be one of them, not worrying about the price of tea. I walked home slowly, feeling heavy inside. When I got back, I made tea for myself and sat by the window. I watched the lights in other buildings. I told myself, I will not give up. I will try. The next morning, I opened my notebook again. This time, I did not write about costs. I wrote my favorite recipes: soft bread rolls, cinnamon cake, fruit pie. I imagined people eating them and smiling. I imagined handing over a warm loaf to a customer. I imagined feeling proud again. That afternoon, I baked a small cake and took it to my parents' house. My mother took a bite and said, "This is the best cake I have tasted." My father smiled and said, "If you sell this, people will come." It was the first time in months I felt someone believed in me. That night, I slept better. I still had no money for supplies, but I had a small fire in my heart. I told myself I would find a way. I would take small steps. I would not let anyone put out this dream. I did not know how long it would take. I only knew I could not stop. The next weeks were not easy. My husband grew more impatient. Some nights he came home and did not speak to me at all. Other nights he said, "You still have no job. We cannot live like this." I tried to smile and say, "I am trying," but my voice was weak. My sons also began to notice the tension. They spoke less at dinner. They spent more time in their rooms. I missed the evenings when we would all talk and laugh together. Now the air in the flat felt heavy, like a storm was coming. I kept baking for practice. I made bread, small cakes, and cookies. I gave them to neighbors and to my parents. They smiled and said nice things, but no one bought anything yet. Every time I baked, I hoped someone would ask for more. No one did. One Saturday morning, my sister called. She said, "I heard you are still making bread. Lydia, you should stop this. Find real work. This is a waste of time." Her voice was sharp, and I felt like I was back in school, being scolded. I wanted to defend myself, but I just said, "I will think about it." That afternoon, I went to the market. I passed a stall selling fresh bread. People were buying quickly. I stood for a moment and watched. The bread was not even as soft as mine, but people still bought it. I thought, if they can sell, so can I. My heart felt a little stronger, but the money problem was real. Bills kept coming. My husband reminded me every few days that we needed more income. "We cannot pay for everything with my salary," he said. "This is not my job alone." I wanted to shout, "And cleaning the house is not just my job alone either." But I stayed quiet. One Monday morning, I felt more tired than usual. I had washed clothes, cooked lunch, and cleaned the whole kitchen. My hands were dry from soap. My back hurt from bending. I sat down for a moment. When I tried to get up, my head felt heavy. I stayed in the chair, staring at the floor. My husband came home for lunch. He looked around and said, "Why is the floor dirty? Why didn't you sweep?" I wanted to say I was not feeling well, but instead I said, "I will do it later." He shook his head and muttered something under his breath. After he left, I went to the bedroom and closed the door. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought, why does no one see me? Why does no one ask if I am okay? I give my time, my work, and my care every day. But I feel invisible. 2 days later, the same feeling came back. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. The water was warm, but my heart felt cold. My hands started shaking. I put the plate down, sat on the floor, and cried into a towel. I cried until my eyes were sore and my head hurt. When my sons came home, I quickly wiped my face. I did not want them to see me like that. I made them tea and asked about their day. Inside, I felt empty. That night, I could not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The flat was dark and quiet. I looked at my notebook of recipes. I ran my fingers over the pages. I thought. I have to try harder. I cannot wait for someone to give me permission to start. The next morning, I took a small step. I baked 4 loaves of bread and put them in a basket. I went to 3 neighbors and offered them for sale. The first 2 said no. The third neighbor, an older man, bought one. He said, "I will tell my friends. This is good bread." It was only one sale, but it felt like a big victory. That evening, I told my husband. He looked surprised. "You sold bread? For how much?" I told him. He nodded and said, "It is a start." His voice was softer than before. Over the next week, I sold 3 more loaves and 1 cake. The money was small, but it made me feel alive again. I had a reason to wake up and work for myself. One Friday, my neighbor knocked on the door. She said, "There is a small cafe near the bus stop. They need fresh bread every day. I told them about you. The owner wants to meet you." My heart began to beat faster. I thanked her again and again. That weekend, I baked samples, white bread, brown bread, and sweet rolls. I carried them carefully to the cafe. The owner, a kind woman, tasted them and smiled. "I like your bread," she said. "Can you bring 10 loaves every morning?" I almost said yes right away, but I stopped. I thought about the work. I thought about my supplies. Then I said, "Yes, I can." Walking home, I felt light, almost like I was flying. It was not a big order, but it was my first real job in months. That night, I told my husband. He said, "Good. I am proud of you." My sons smiled and asked if they could help me bake. It was the first time in a long while that I felt we were on the same side. I knew it would be hard. I would have to wake up very early to bake before the cafe opened. I would have to buy more flour and yeast. But for the first time in many months, I felt like my life was moving forward. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The city was still quiet. The street outside was empty. I went to the kitchen and turned on the light. The small yellow bulb made the room warm. I washed my hands, tied my hair, and took out the flour, yeast, and salt. I started mixing the dough. My hands pressed and folded the soft mass again and again. The smell of yeast filled the air. I shaped the loaves and placed them on the trays. While they rose, I made tea and watched the sky turn pale blue. When the oven was hot, I slid the bread inside. Soon the smell spread through the whole flat. My sons came into the kitchen, still sleepy. "It smells good, Mom," one said. I gave them each a slice of yesterday's bread with butter. They sat and ate while I packed the new loaves into baskets. At 7 a.m., I carried the bread to the cafe. The air outside was cold, but my heart felt warm. The cafe owner smiled when she saw me. "Perfect timing," she said. She smelled the bread and nodded. "Yes, this will sell fast." She paid me and put the loaves on display. When I walked home, I felt light. The coins in my pocket were not much, but they were mine. I had earned them with my own hands. This became my new routine. Every day I woke before the sun. I baked, delivered, and cleaned the kitchen before my sons went to school. The work was not easy, but I felt proud. I was building something of my own. After 2 weeks, the cafe owner said, "Your bread sells out every morning. Can you bring 15 loaves instead of 10? My heart jumped. "Yes," I said. I needed more flour now, so I went to the market and bought big bags. The seller gave me a discount when I told him I was baking for the cafe. "Good bread brings good luck," he said. I smiled all the way home. At night, I started testing new recipes. Sweet rolls with cinnamon, small pies with apples, soft bread with herbs. My sons helped me taste them. Sometimes they gave funny faces. Sometimes they said, "This is amazing." I wrote the good recipes in my notebook. One evening, my husband came home with a bag of sugar and butter. "For your baking," he said. I looked at him and felt my eyes fill with tears. It was the first time he had bought something for my dream. The days were still full of work, but the house felt different now. My husband spoke to me with more respect. My sons told their friends that their mother made the bread for the cafe. I could see the pride in their eyes. One Saturday, the cafe owner invited me to sit for tea after my delivery. She said, "Some customers ask if you can make bread for their homes too. If you want, I can give them your number." I almost dropped my cup. "Yes, of course," I said. Soon, I had small orders from people around the neighborhood. Some wanted bread twice a week. Some wanted cakes for birthdays. I started writing down all the orders so I would not forget. But more orders meant more work. I woke even earlier, sometimes at 4 a.m., to prepare everything. My arms and back were tired, but my heart was happy. Each loaf that left my kitchen carried a part of me. One evening, I sat at the table and counted my earnings. It was not a huge amount, but it was enough to pay for half of the month's electricity bill. I showed my husband, and he said, "You are helping a lot." I was wrong before. Those words stayed in my heart for many days. By spring, I had saved enough to buy a second oven. It was not new, but it worked well. Now I could bake twice as much at the same time. I also bought new trays and a bigger table for the kitchen. My little space was turning into a real bakery corner. I decided to make a small sign and put it outside my door. Fresh bread and cakes. Ask inside. Some neighbors stopped just to talk. Others came with coins in their hands, smiling and pointing to the sign. One afternoon, a woman I had never seen before knocked on my door. She said, "I live 3 streets away. My friend told me you make the best bread here. Can I order for my family every week?" I said yes, my heart beating fast. That evening, I sat on the balcony with tea and watched the sunset. The light turned the buildings orange and pink. I thought about the last year. I thought about how I had cried in this same kitchen, feeling useless and invisible. Now, I felt seen. I felt needed. Still, I knew the road was not always smooth. Some days the bread was not perfect. Once the yeast failed, and I had to start again at 5 a.m. Another time, I burned a whole tray because I was distracted. But I learned from every mistake. One Sunday, my parents came to visit. I served them warm bread with cheese. My father smiled and said, "I knew you could do it." My mother hugged me and said, "You look happier now." That night, I planted a small lemon tree in a pot on the balcony. I wanted it to grow as my business grew. I thought, when this tree gives fruit, I will know I have made it. Summer came, and the cafe asked for more sweet rolls. Birthday cake orders increased. I started saving money each week. I put the coins in a small jar on the top shelf. It was my future jar. I did not know yet what I would use it for, but I liked seeing it fill up. One day, my sister visited again. She looked at the baskets of bread and said, "So this is working?" I smiled and said, "Yes, it is." She touched one loaf and said, "I was wrong. You were right to try." Her words felt like another layer of healing. By autumn, I was making enough to pay for my own supplies, give money for bills, and still save a little. My husband began to tell his friends about my work. "My wife bakes for the cafe," he would say with pride. "My son sometimes helped with deliveries." We laughed more at the table again. One evening, after finishing the last batch of bread, I sat by the lemon tree. The leaves moved gently in the wind. I thought about the dark days when I almost gave up. I thought about the first loaf I sold, the first coin in my hand. I thought about the feeling of being useful again. I knew life would still have problems. Bills would still come. Some weeks might be slow. But now I had proof that I could stand up again. I could build something from nothing. I touched the lemon tree and whispered, "We are both growing." For the first time in a long time, I believed in myself completely. We all go through hard times, but stories like this can help us feel seen. Thank you for watching, and come back for more real moments.